On this episode, I talk with Coach Matt Brisotti. Hey everybody, I'm Tarek Merchant, and this is the IMRecruitable show. I'm here with Hamilton College's tennis coach, Matt Brisotti, men's and women's tennis. Matt, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, man. I think this is going to be a great episode because we're going to talk a lot about Division III colleges, recruiting in general, how that differs from Division I and II, NAIA junior college. I want to give a little bit of context to our listeners out there about Matt. Matt and I met, how many years ago now, Matt? 6? 7?
5 or 6.
5 or 6 years? Okay. And he first connected with me when I was starting my college showcases. We were in our couple years into it. He started his coaching career in a few different spots, landed his first head coach gig at Drew University, where he was looking to get more exposure for the school and getting more players from around the country. And he landed, a spot at joining us at the Florida showcase that we've been hosting. And, you and I, Matt, we connected really quick. Matt's a really fun guy, really personal guy, somebody that really thrives in the environment of being around the players and getting them to trust him and enjoy their college process as they go through it, not only on the recruiting side, but once they get into school and having a really successful career as a student athlete. So, I want you to be able to give your story and your background, but I wanted to give a little context about how we met, how much I think that you can bring value not only to this show, to just parents and players in general. What you've done with your programs in your short career has been phenomenal already. Being a young coach, especially a young head coach coming straight out of college and doing that, it's really an awesome thing. It's really hard for people to do initially. A lot of people take time to grow, but you're very mature in what you do, and I really respect it a lot, Matt. So for our listeners out there, why don't you give yourself them 2 to 3 minute background about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Just kind of a quick background on myself. I grew up on Long Island, then played my junior tennis out there on Long Island. Then I went to Drew University for my college ball, where I had a great 4-year career. We had a really successful high-level program, making about second round of NCAAs each year. So we got the automatic bid through our conference. That was really great for our program. Then shortly after I graduated, I stayed in the private scene, but I wanted something more. I wanted deeper connections, and I thought, what better way to start giving back than, try my hand at coaching. I had a bunch of family members that were coaches, so I said, let's give this thing a whirl, let's see how it goes. Luckily, for me, I had a great opportunity to step into my alma mater at the time, Drew, and I spent about 4 to 5 years there, turning the program back into a national contender, which I thought was a really great, really great for me in the first couple bits as a head coach, learning not only the recruiting side, but also just in general, just how to deal with student athletes, their issues, and also learn how to support them on and off the court. I think was definitely one of the biggest things I learned right away. I knew that it was only going to take hard work. And then, last January, so January of 2018, I started up at Hamilton College, and that's kind of and that's where I've been there since, and really looking forward to it.
So Matt, about your playing background? Talk a little bit more about you being a multisport athlete, and I know you played a lot of soccer as well. So would love to hear a little bit more about that, because I think one of the things that you bring and where we started to connect more is when you started coming to the exposure camps that I founded over the last years, and hopefully we can get a little clip in there of Matt having some fun at some of the exposure camps. But you bring a lot of energy, and I feel like you bring the team atmosphere more than tennis players typically are used to, because you're used to having that team sport background.
Yeah, I started playing tennis about the age of 10, but I started playing soccer at the age of 5. So I was a multi-sport athlete throughout my whole high school and junior career at the same time. So I had to learn how to balance that, but also really prepare me for when I went into college ball, and I could help use my background. Like I was a team captain of the soccer team by the time I was a senior in high school, and that was really great just to learn leadership skills in a traditional team setting environment, and learning kind of how to handle always the individual but also team aspect. I thought that was really big for me, because I was able to learn that a lot of my success depends on my teammates' success at all times, and without them, kind of a lot of what I can do can feel very, very insignificant. Meanwhile, tennis, a lot of times you feel like you win, you do really well, then that's kind of everything that matters. But meanwhile, you could still lose a match, and and learn that you could have done more than just go out there and just win against your opponent.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. What do you do specifically with your teams in regards to that atmosphere then? I mean, do you ask them to do that every time, like to bring that sort of culture? How do you help them evolve into that?
Yeah, I think it takes, I think it takes a teamwork approach to be able to get that, to be honest. I think you have to have a coaching staff that really buys into it, and I know myself and my assistant here, we're absolutely on the same page about building that culture and showing that extra support for players, and try to make it on a deeper level as well, so that way they can have a lot of trust in us. I think getting to know them off the court really, really helps out on the court. But to promote that team atmosphere, a lot of it is just really good, honest conversations about how well we thought we did in the moment to be able to support not only ourselves, our school, and our family as well at the same time, and just kind of leaving that question of, could there have been more that we could have done on that day? I think that's super important, and having the student athletes realize that, and also taking hard looks at coaching staff and being like, could we have been better for you on that day, and kind of have a really good two-way conversation about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is great context that you're giving me already to lead up to the questions that I want to ask you. And so, we've had so many discussions on and off the tennis court over the years. I really think that you're one of the people that we bounce a lot of ideas off of, especially when it comes to promoting the game of tennis and Division III tennis and sports in general, knowing that less than 1% of athletes overall get D1 full rides, and then knowing that there's more Division I colleges out there than anything compared to Division I and II, that the likelihood of playing Division III is way higher than anything else. I mean, you're a great example of that. I mean, you could have played Division I, you could have played Division II, you could have played NAIA, you could have gone to a junior college, you decided to go Division III. So, that's sort of leading into the question of, why should parents and student athletes be looking at Division III colleges outside of even the statistics that you're probably more likely to be there than not, and what are the advantages over there?
Yeah, I think obviously you look at just pure statistics, you look at the numbers. Division III programs are a lot more abundant on the male and female side compared to Division I and Division II and NAIA and JUCO. So a lot of the players out there, you are probably going to go Division III, and the biggest misconception is that Division III means level, and it really does for a lot of sports. If you take Division III basketball teams playing against Division I teams, they're really not going to be able to compete that well. But you look at a lot of Division I and Division III schedules, a lot of times that they really do compete against one another. A lot of times the Division III team will win. So right. A lot of times people just look at it as a pure competitive standpoint, that Division III isn't as competitive as Division I.
Right, they're looking at it like soccer, right? Like where it's the Serie A or Bundesliga or whatever, and it's like Division I, II, III. And like you said, in basketball and football, it's more prominent that way because of the funding. But with tennis, when you don't have the funding that you do in those sports, and therefore players are also looking at the education side, right? And you have so many great Division III colleges that are top academics. So if you're not going into those the Dukes and the Stanfords of the world, that you might be looking Division III and still having a very competitive environment.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You kind of nailed you nailed it right on the head there. That I think that you're really able to study and do exactly what you really want to be able to do in college in a Division III environment. You hear a lot of stories about players not being able to take what their major is in college because of their tennis time being taken up. And I think up front in the recruiting process, even as simple as there, you should be really talking about, hey, I want to be able to study this, coach. Is this going to be okay for me to be able to study? And I think what you're going to hear from 99.9% 90% of the Division III schools, and really 100%, I can say that with confidence, is that you're going to be able to study what you want to do. You want to be a pre-med major, you can do pre-med, but then also you want to be on the dance team or the a cappella team or on the debate club. Like, you're going to be able to have those opportunities, and I think that's really, really great to be able to really further yourself, when your 4 years is over, to really prepare yourself for the real world, because all you haven't done is your academics and athletics. You're going to be able to get involved in a lot of other things while at a Division III institution.
So are you saying that the demand on the tennis side is not as high for Division III colleges, sports-wise, versus Division I's, let's say, and twos? Like, they're not expecting you to train as much. They're not expecting you to compete as hard. I mean, is that the right way? Because I see it also a whole bunch of teams that are really, really good Division III that compete hard. So why is it that in Division III they're allowing the kids to go and do what they want to do, study what they want? On the Division I side, we do know that there are some coaches that will say, well, if you pick these majors, it's really going to limit your ability to perform on the court, because if you're in sciences and you have to go to all these labs and everything, like, it is really hard to get to practice at 1 or 2 o'clock and do 2 hours of on court, or 3, plus your private, plus your fitness and all that stuff. So how does it work on the Division III side and still be really competitive?
Yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of programs, including programs that I've been, had the opportunity to be the head of. We're training a lot. We are able to put in that good 2.5 hour practice on top of strength and conditioning sessions and on top of individuals. The thing that we always preach and a lot of our values is honestly just about your balanced approach to things, and you never want to be obsessed in the range, and you're really just triggered on tennis the whole time, because you're going to be an 18 to 22-year-old kid only once. I think that's super important, that you are able to experience a lot of other things, because during your junior career in high school, you are doing primarily a lot of, tennis and academics. And I think college is a great time, and a lot of Division III philosophy is that you're going to indulge yourself in these other areas. But it doesn't mean to say that, we're definitely not training as hard as the Division I programs during our practice time, because I know for a fact that our student athletes are really, really putting great efforts in and out every single day, and their games are always improving in the program.
So you're suggesting that, or you're saying that the Division III programs will still let you do what you want academically. There'll be nobody persuading you to do something else, or to maybe say to you, well, I don't know if we can really handle your schedule. You'll work around the kids' schedules.
Yeah. I think a lot of Division III coaches really, really take the philosophy of, we're going to work around your schedule. Obviously, we're going to have our team schedule first and foremost, and you're going to have to know the commitments up front, and this is, what we have to do to be successful.
Yep.
And a lot of student athletes just kind of know that is kind of signing on board, but their passion for the game is also very high. So when it does time to have those kind of conversations, their passion's really high. But we might have to be on a coach's end very flexible. We might have to meet with a player to do an individual at 8 a.m. and then we won't see them till 4. So it might mean a longer day for coaching staff and those kind of things. But to be honest, the students and the student athletes are putting in a lot of work. So why shouldn't the coaching staff as well match that effort and intensity that they're given? Just instead of a coaching staff saying, hey, listen, 1 to 6, that's all you're going to get from us on court. We really try to be there as much as we can for student athletes. And I know a ton of Division III coaches also share that same philosophy of just like, hey, we understand you're going to have a lot going on, but we're going to be here for you. So if you need to make that individual at a little bit of an off hour, no worries. We have your back.
Got it.
We're going to help you get successful.
Yeah. So now going into, let's say you've established a situation where you're saying, okay, I'm looking at all these colleges. I understand, hopefully by all these discussions we're having, and this one in particular, that parents and athletes realize from an early age that they should be looking at all the divisions and keeping an open mind and understanding what the different divisions may offer, or the types of schools that are allocated in those divisions, and saying, all right, now I've looked at everything, and I may be going Division III, and I'm a smart kid. I want to get into a great school. It's difficult to get into these schools. So if it's difficult to get into these schools, a lot of people think then, well, the coaches can get me into this school. they have the power. They can, if I'm a great tennis player and I'm a 12 UTR boy, or I'm a, 9 girl and I'm a 5-star stud player, like, oh, no problem. Like, I'm going to get into these schools because the coach is just going to back me up. Is that really how it's going to work? I mean, you and I both know the answer to that. So, but I want you to give some context there on how it actually works.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're dealing with upper, higher level academic, where you have rejection rates or only acceptance rates that are 12.5% to 20% of the kids. So it means that they're probably rejecting about 80% of their applications. Ivies, I think, just for reference, are around accepting 4 or 5% of the kids per se, maybe as high as 7 on a year percent of kids. But I think a lot of times when players think that, I have a lot of talent to bring, that can overcome any shortcomings that they have in the classroom, and Division III does not have athletic scholarships. There's nothing that we can, be able to provide for them athletically for their, to supplement kind of offset finances. But a lot of times kids are just really looking for admission slips, and we don't have that power to be like, hey, listen, you're a really good player. You are way below our median standards here, but you know what? You're really good, and you're going to help us win. So, come on aboard. That we don't have any power to be able to do that. I think the biggest thing is that throughout the entire process, you're always viewed as a student first, and then an athlete second. So I think it's super important for all the parents and student and players listening to really know that your academics really have to be on par with exactly what the school is. And a coach cannot just wave a magic wand and just be like, well, they're really good, I think they're going to help us out, or hey, they're a really good kid, I want them in our program. But, say if our average ACT is a 34 and you're like and you're a 29, that's, what's 3 or 4 points or 5 points here amongst friends? It's really no big deal. It's actually a really big indicator on potential student success. And that's the biggest thing that admissions always looks for. They want to make sure that they're able to ensure student success while they're here. And those guidelines are there for a reason, so that way we can help predict student success. And, people don't like hearing the word no, and it's tough, and coaches have to hear it from players, but also players have to hear it from coaches. Doesn't matter if it's from a Division III end, just saying, hey, listen, your academics just aren't high enough for where we're at. Like I've developed relations with potential players that I've been recruiting where it hasn't been a great fit, but I've said, hey, I think that you're a little bit off for us. This, I can't really do much for you here. But I think these types of schools would also be great. So I think if a coach does tell you no, and it's realistic to hear a no from a coach, potentially ask them in their opinion about schools that might be a better fit in their opinion, because sometimes you always have our reach goals, and it's always good to have those goals, but when those goals might not become a reality, try to figure out what that right fit is. And there's a ton of schools out there that could really, really be great fits for a lot of kids. And, even though it doesn't work out at one school that you want to put a little more eggs in your basket in, it happens. It's part of life, and everything happens for a reason. So just try to take the positive side on it.
Yeah. I think the important thing is that every school has a different situation, right? And I think that also differs from year to year. Depending on how the school's doing and what they're going to allow you to do. Some schools have slotted positions as well where they can help the athlete, but like you said, you can't be light years off from their actual requirements because they do take it student athlete first, but they also want you to be successful at the university. And so if you're coming to school and you don't have the grades and the test scores, then it's an indicator that you might not be able to cope up with the schoolwork, which means you're going to end up failing out. You're not going to be on the tennis team then, and nothing's going to work out. You'll end up transferring somewhere else. So can you talk a little bit about the different school requirements and the fact that you have to actually go and do the research every year, and you can't worry about what someone else did the year before? And Jimmy got in because Jimmy had a 32 ACT, and the coach helped him support the application, and he got in with this and this, and he was this level. I'm a better tennis player. I have a 30 ACT, but coach won't take me and says he doesn't have any spots. Can you talk about all those different angles and how the parents and athletes need to do it? I mean, there is no magic wand, as you said. There is no specific list that's going to give you those answers. It's specific to your years, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that, parents and, to be honest, parents should help educate their children on this so that so that way the children are already asked those tough questions, is be like, what type of support do you potentially have? How does that impact my graduation year? So if you're a 2019, a 2020, a 21, a 22, keep kind of going down the list, how would that be able to change over time? What are the biggest requirements that you're looking for? I think coaches can really be able to give some of those answers, and a lot of those answers, or at least get you an inner range, because sometimes you might not know until after their junior year and going to their senior year, kind of where things might shape out a little bit, and sometimes too, sometimes it does change between, from the previous year's class to next year's class. So I think you always have to try to answer, ask those questions from coaches and be like, hey, like how many potential student athletes are you looking for? How many do you think that could really help? If this all works out great, how many potential kids can you support maybe through the process, or slot support? Kind of different phrases mean different things, and ask each coach if they start using certain language that maybe you're not sure about. Just don't assume a spot means a support or a spot. Don't try to assume they all mean the same thing.
That's right. Right.
So I definitely try to ask the coaches what kind of, like, what can you help us with, essentially? Or is it more of just like, I'm applying as a regular student and then I have the opportunity to come onto the team?
Yeah.
There are some schools that are like that as well. So you have to really do your homework and ask a formulated set of questions that if a player is looking at 20, 25 schools in the beginning, you're going to make sure you ask all those same 10, 15 questions to all 20, 25 of those coaches, so that way you can learn a little bit about a difference.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, because people are always, and I think this needs to be hammered home to the families and parents, especially who are helping their children at those ages, 15, 16, 17, that are learning, that are trying to realize that this is about, your future, college, there's money involved, things that they're not familiar with, that you got to ask questions. You can't be afraid, like you said, like a spot for one school and coach, the way he's explaining it may not be what you're assuming the other coach is saying, because his determination or his sort of definition of spot might mean supported application, versus another school it's not. It's like, hey, I got a spot for you if you get in on your own, and here's the deadline, or here's the situation, I need you to apply early. Everything is so different. That's what makes recruiting, I think, very complicated. But the simplest answer is that, do your research. Go to those 25 schools or whatever you're looking at, 50 schools, no matter what the number is, 47. Do your research, right, and get the information out of the coaches. And you guys are willing to help. I think that's the main thing, is people are scared to ask you guys questions, but you're willing to give the best answer you can.
Yeah.
And that, you're recruiting a lot of kids too, so you're going to do your job and they've got to do their job, right? I mean, you're looking for the best player and you're going to give that player the best opportunity that you have available to them, because you want to better your team, and the kid is looking for their best option too. So, everybody's sort of kind of fighting for what they want, and that's just the way it works, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with those questions though that you were starting to ask about college, what are the questions that a player now, say that they've got those college questions out of the way, what are the questions they should be asking the coaches, and that they normally don't ask? Because we've had many discussions about this, and that especially at our exposure camps, we try to educate, especially you do this very, very well. You try to develop the scenarios. Maybe we can throw in a clip of that too if we have. Not sure if we do, but where you have the players, and the coach sort of meetings and interviews when they go in for visits, and how they should actually play it out versus the questions that they ask that they shouldn't be asking.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, coaches get a wide range of questions. A lot of coaches kind of talk about different scenarios that they've been in. But I've kind of come to realize that there's a lot of general baseline questions a lot of players ask. It's kind of the same same questions, because obviously they're pressing. But then it's interesting when students arrive to campus, how those questions or things maybe they didn't ask in the recruiting process becomes a bigger deal all of a sudden now that they're there.
Right.
And I feel that if it's going to be a question that you're going to have day one when you walk out and you have a question about the program, that should be a question you should probably ask in the recruiting process, because it's definitely very, very important. I think a couple things especially is, a lot of times you have one or two coaches that you work with in your junior training, that it's just you, maybe one other person, and you're getting their undivided attention for that hour and a half to 2 hour lesson or hour lesson, whatever it may be, X amount of times a week, maybe 2, maybe 4 times, who knows, and sometimes they might travel with you to tournaments, and also learn about ways to be able to help devise your lesson plans. College tennis is a lot different because every coaching situation varies. You might have a head coach and assistant coach for 2 programs. You got to know if that coach is full-time. Are they full-time? Are they part-time? When are they available for student athletes? How can I ensure that on a tennis court there's actually a player development plan for me in place, or are we just kind of winging it out here and I really don't know where I stand with things, and also too, like, sometimes and actually a lot of times you're going to have to be a really good person who's very self-accountable and self-aware of your actions in practice, because you might only have, you might have a roster of 10 or 12, but then you might only have 1, maybe 2 coaches out there. So that's still a 5 to 6 to 1 ratio. We're going to try to do our best on our end, and I'm sure every single coach tries to do the same thing to make sure that they're able to give you all the attention and all the little and to be able to correct you on all your little details and things you can improve on, and say you really did well in this drill, or say if you really did well on that drill. But the reality is sometimes you don't always get that constant feedback, and sometimes that does get frustrating for players. But I think it's important to know going into college that you should be aware of this right away. That you're going to be walking on to a team of 11 or 12 players, 10 players, whatever it may be, and you might really want all the attention in the world, but you're going to have to learn that it's a team atmosphere first. And whatever the team has to really work on that's going to be what we want to work on. And then if you want to do some individual things because you have certain concerns about things, absolutely you can address them after practice, before practice, those kind of things. But are you going to be able to get that nitty gritty correction after every single ball that you get in a private lesson? A lot of times the answer is going to be no. And I think that's a common frustration that happens, especially throughout a first year cycle on college. I think a good team culture will have leadership and upperclassmen reach out to them and say, hey, this is perfectly natural. We felt the same thing, but you'll really understand that. I think another one is, so not only on the individual attention aspect, and that's going back to adjusting to an actual team environment, more of just a one-on-one, 2-on-1 clinic setting. I think another big one is obviously, what does your team do together? How much time is, taken up on off the court things? Does your team hang out a lot together off the court? Or is it like a business arrangement? We show up to practice and then we go do our thing, or are they a true team on and off the court? I think that's a really big question that a lot of times doesn't totally get asked or honestly asked to its fullest, because I think it's a very important daily life atmosphere thing.
Right.
For sure.
Right. So there's like a lot of different angles to a player's college career. There's different types of coaches. And I think that people need to understand that happens in Division I too, and Division II. Like, you get part-time coaches and full-time coaches. You get coaches that are more involved in the development, and you get coaches that are better at the management and are expecting the players to figure things out more so on their own than they're able to coach them. There's different coaching staffs with different number of people on board who are available. So, some schools have just the head coach, some schools have an assistant, some schools have a volunteer as well. So you're looking at 1 to 3 staff members on average. And, sometimes it's split between how does it work with the men's and women's. Like a lot of times if you have a men's and women's team like you do, for example, and I'll ask you this, what do you do when both the men's and women are going and playing separate places? Will your assistant who's a woman go with the women's team? Will you go with the men's, vice versa? Because you're going to have to split up time, right? These are all questions that people should have, right? And try to understand, but also realize that it is what it is, right? And this is the environment that you're going to be in, not that individual environment of the coach travels with me, I get all the full attention, and figure out what's best for you. And I think part of it is also the academics, right? It's like, all right, well, am I willing to sacrifice some of these things that this one team is able to bring to me on a tennis standpoint, and this other school that I'm looking at might be bringing the better program for me academically, but doesn't have exactly what I want tennis-wise, and I think that comes through the questions, right? It has to.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also is your 4 years as a college tennis player is very valuable, and you want to know how also the program might change over the course of the 4 years as well.
Yeah.
I think those are all really important things to ask coaches, because if you take a team that's at the top, at the top of their conference or at the top of the division, you're like, all right, I would love to be a part of this, but also, coach, like, I'm coming because we can potentially win really big, and I want to be able to do that. So what do we have to keep doing to do that? Or if it's a case of a program that's, middle to lower in their conference or even across the division as a whole, all right, coach, I really want to come on in, but I also want to get really competitive. How can we work together to get ourselves more competitive? What is it going to take? I think those are questions that you hear very, very infrequently.
Right. And so what are the questions that you hear all the time that you would say, I get these questions all the time and they're not really even great, are they great questions or not? What are the things that you get that you would like to hear kids do differently on that part?
Yeah, I think the typical questions, and I think going across the fact that every program is going to be different and every recruiting situation is different. You hear a lot of the questions that are still really good questions about, how long do you practice for? What is a typical practice week schedule? How often are you missing class for competitions? Do you do a spring break trip? Questions like that are still really good, because as much as they're routine, they could really change depending on everyone's scenario. If you have a school that's up in the Northeast, and you have practice in February, are we driving 30 minutes off campus for a indoor club, or do we have courts on campus that we can use? I think those are big differences, and trying to be, so I think every situation, so there's no such thing as a bad question to ask a coach.
Okay.
I think sometimes it's got to break that surface level of just generalities of things and try to get a little bit more specific to, what your experience would be like as a player. Instead of looking on the outside a little bit, I think you want to ask about what things are like from the outside. Like, oh, this is a calendar view. They practice, 16 hours a week, and they're in the weight room for 3. Okay, cool. It's about 20 hours a week I'm going to be on, but what is that time spent like? I think that's a deeper issue that we're trying to deal with sometimes, that a lot of times does not get addressed fully, is, so what am I going to be doing during that time? Or what's expected of me at that time? And what stuff will I be doing during that time? What is your practice plan like? How do you manage, different levels, and you have to be able to all work together as a team to be able to still get successful? Like, how do you do that, coach? And we never hear that a lot. It's really great and refreshing when we hear that. But I think players and parents can really educate themselves a lot more about what makes each program different a little bit by going beyond those surface level questions of, oh, how many times a week do you practice? How do you deal with class time issues? If you have to leave for a match, how does that work out? And actually divulging onto what your everyday experience will be.
Deeper questions, and because everybody asks the basics. You got to ask the basics, right? It's like, I know that whenever I'm got an individual player, regardless of what division school they're going to, we come up with their needs and wants and their, what they're looking to get out of college, right? On the educational side and on the tennis side. I think that's important on whatever sport you play. It's like, what's my end goal here? You know, am I looking to be the best player I can be? Am I looking to see how I do and then potentially see if I can play, you know, professionally and jump on, you know, get onto the circuit? Am I looking to have a great just atmosphere and play a little bit, but really not focus on tennis too much? Because what people don't understand, there's a place for everybody, right? And so there's schools that can fit in those categories for you. So if you're somebody who likes tennis but doesn't want to do it all day long and have it interfere too much with your studies, then you're looking for a program that is less, you know, competitive on the tennis side. If, you know, although all of them are competitive, it's less competitive relatively. Then there's the middle ground and then the next one. And I think that the way that those questions can come to you guys as coaches would be if they know what they want to do, or they start to learn when they're working with their parents, and whether it's a recruiting coach and anybody in their team that has experience can get those questions out of them, so that when they come to you, they can say, hey, Coach Matt, like, you know, here's all the basic questions that most kids would have, and now here's my specific questions because I'd like to do this with my tennis career. I'd like to do this with my academics. How can, you know, you help me with that? Goals, my dreams, right? And I think that makes it a lot easier for you guys then to say what you can and cannot do, right? And if it's the right fit program, because I know you're hugely on giving kids the right fit.
Yeah, I think knowing exactly what you're essentially signing up for in the recruiting process, and you know exactly what's going to be expected of you, I think is one of the biggest things in it, because you look at transfer rates throughout the, you know, and what the NCAA puts out, I think the numbers are just too high. You know, you look at that, and I think it comes down to sometimes it's financial reasons, you know, that all of a sudden, oh, I thought I could pay this much for each year, but oh, I really forgot we're going to have to times it by 4, you know, because then you have that bill coming again the next year. So some of it's financial. Some of it's just like, I don't want to spend this much time in tennis. Like, it's just too much for me, you know, so I'm going to leave the program just because it's too much, you know. And sometimes it's just like, I didn't even have my major, you know, and you're like, well, why'd you go there? You know,
yeah. Just a lack of preparation and a lack of knowledge, right? You're putting yourselves in these positions, like you said, where you didn't get the tennis experience you wanted, or it's too much, the opposite, because you didn't ask the questions, because that's how the coach works. Like most of the time, right? Unless the coach was a new coach. Now, those are different situations, but you normally probably didn't ask the right questions. You didn't realize that school didn't have the major you wanted and put enough emphasis on understanding what the academic program was. And so the more these parents can and athletes can learn about it and educate themselves and use all the tools and the advice like what you're giving, I think could be very valuable to them, right? And in the end, you're going to have a better team, right? And they're going to be happy.
I think you're going to have a fit. You know, I think at the end of the day, coaches and players and parents, they just want the right fit at all times. You know, I think that's the best, when it's just like it's a seamless transition into, you know, your junior playing career into college playing career. But sometimes it's not as simple as that. I think you have to really focus on what are we asking and why. You know, if I'm going to ask these questions, and a lot of times coaches will also ask players these questions, is why are we asking this question? You know, and why do we want to know this information? You know, if your goal is to go to a college and you really want to try to go pro after college, then just make that upfront to the coaching staff and be like, listen, I'm going to invest a lot of time in my tennis here. You know, can I be supported, and can I be put in that environment to really take my game to the next level? Or I just want to have a really good 4-year career. I want to win some conference titles. I want to go to the NCAA tournament, you know, but I don't want to be up doing individuals in the mornings, like, you know, 3 or 4 times a week. Like, I don't really want to be doing that. You know, I think knowing that along the way is super important, because every program is structured differently. And when you ask those surface level questions, sometimes it's just the general ones, so you don't ask about your experience of what it's going to be like, you know, then I think that's where a lot of complications occur.
Yeah, no, that's some awesome advice, Matt. I want to thank you a lot for giving me the time to chat with you today. And I think there's some really, really good information that parents and players can take away. Even college coaches can learn from this, or to get ideas. And everybody's constantly learning, and at the same time we're evolving with our programs, right? And recruiting can be so complicated and difficult, but we want to try to simplify it for them and give them as much information as possible. So any advice that you had was well taken. It makes sense. I think that it provides tremendous value to people to listen to it, and then hopefully we can get you back on again, take some of the comments and feedback, and then see if we can help answer some more questions for people. So that was great. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you soon in Florida.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.